We'll get there. And I think we are live. Here we are in the spoiler room. Thank you, everyone, for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. And we are kicking off a new month. It is On the Lam month. So we're looking at films with people who are on the lam. They're accused, and these are innocent people. These are people who are accused of a crime. And whether or not they committed it or not, we're not going to spoil it for you. But they're on the run from the law. And tonight I decided we kick it off with 1993. Yes, a new film, folks. We've been covering some classic films. A newer film, The Fugitive from 1993. And I have a wonderful full panel with us tonight to talk about this Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones chase film. First off, he is back with us. He's the one-armed man tonight. It is none other than Mr. Mike Crowley. Hello, Mike. So glad to have you here in the spoiler room.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So happy to be here, and back with us as well, the one and only Joe Randazzo is here. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hey guys, what's up? Glad to be back. I missed the last. I missed the last 2 months worth.
We missed you a bit on a couple of those classics. I heard you in the back of our head anyway, and whether that's good or not, take that how you will. And then, of course, we also have here with us tonight Mr. Jeff York. Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. And Ian Simmons is with us in spirit. The man who keeps coming back for more didn't come back tonight. He's got other plans, but he's with us with spirit. So, yes, we're talking Fugitive from director Andrew Davis. And Mike, you think you could give the synopsis of The Fugitive?
Sure. So a man is wrongly accused of murdering his wife. The film starts just with some simple snippet images of the murder and what happened. But because he was wrongfully accused and with a compilation of a misinterpreted 911 call, we think that Dr. Richard
Kimball.
That's right. Dr. Richard Kimball is guilty of assassinating his wife. So what happens? He ends up going on a ride to jail that ends up getting derailed by a train, and he goes on a huge hunt where Tommy Lee Jones is out to go get Dr. Richard Kimball. And I'm just going to call him by their actor names. It's Tommy Lee Jones.
Go for it. That's fine.
Yeah. So the movie's one giant chase to see if Richard Kimball can find the man who killed his wife and prove his innocence and no longer be a convicted felon. All right, so that's sort of the little bite-sized version of it.
That is a good bite-sized version of it. And that pretty well sums it up. The killer is the infamous one-armed man as well. And this is not a remake of the film of the same name from, I think it's 1940 something, 47 or whatever. This is actually based off of the TV show that ran for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive. And so this was back during the 90s when they were feeling out of, hey, we got these old TV show properties. They'd make great feature films. And more often than not, they didn't.
This is an exception, though.
This is one of the big exceptions.
This one didn't wind up like, remember the Avengers, not the...
my God. It's one of the greatest TV shows, and the version of it with Ray Fiennes and Uma Thurman was...
and Sean Connery.
They didn't even capture the essence and the feel of the show. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, even as a kid, I saw that, and I'm like, there's something not right with this film.
It completely missed the point. It needed the dry British angle to it, and it just did not have it. The Avengers. Yeah, there was a whole slew of them, either the sitcoms or action adventure remakes from TV shows to films. Most of them did not do well, but this one, as we gather here from the panel,
well into the 2000s too.
Yeah.
I remember seeing at the video store the the DVD cover for Dukes of Hazzard, with like a little sticker on it with like covering someone's breasts and saying with all the nudity. I'm like, yeah, because that's what I think of when I think of the Dukes of Hazzard TV series. I thought tits. Yeah. There was so many breasts in that show. That's so yeah. Of course you want.
Joe, do you remember how hard they worked to try to make Jessica Simpson a movie star with that movie?
That's true.
That was supposed to be her big. That was kind of supposed to be her big movie. Was that
I
one?
think it flopped, if I remember correctly. I know it was a bad movie, but I don't
it
think
totally
was
flopped.
box
I
office
think
either.
It didn't do well, but they came out with two sequels. So
seriously,
at least one of them was direct to video.
man.
I think both of them were direct to video.
I think they were both.
Yeah. The third one was a prequel to the.
Oh God.
Because that's what we needed. We needed a prequel to the Dukes of Hazzard.
I got to tell you, that was on when I was in high school. And even when I was in high school, I looked at it and went, they're calling that car the General Robert E. Lee. That can't be right. That isn't good for the nation, is it?
Oh, God.
Well, it was different times, but so was 1993, the time when I graduated high school. That's how old or young I am. You can gauge it by that. So we're just going to go around real quick.
I haven't even started high school yet.
Thank you. We're not going to. We're okay. Let's just go around the room and get everybody's top level feeling when they first saw The Fugitive, because this was hyped because of the star power behind it and the fact it was based off of the classic TV show. Mike, let's start with you. When you first saw this,
it's funny. The Fugitive is like one of those movies where I kind of didn't really notice it or appreciate it as a child, because I was not to make everyone feel old, but I was like a little kid when it came out. And my dad owned a video store at the time, and I think The Fugitive was one of like the films people rented a lot from there. And I was like, yeah, this is okay. And now I got older and I saw it, and I'm like, yeah, this is a very fun thriller. Like it's like a constant chase scene. It holds your attention. And, it has a plot that doesn't get too mumbled up in the details as to how this pharmaceutical drug led to the death of Richard Kimball's wife. Yeah. So it's a fun film. And the more times you see it, you see a few more clues you might have lost out on. But yeah, I mean, as an adaptation to the TV series, like as I got older and realized that, I like how they didn't just take like Richard Kimball and just have him jump to multiple locations, but they actually kept it like just within one location within the Chicagoland area. And Andrew Davis is like a director who's like put a lot of Chicago in a lot of his movies. He is a Chicago guy. I filmed an interview with him like way back. I can't even remember how long ago it was, but cool guy. Seen him like 3 or 4 times. That's just my little name drop there. But it's a film that is like it's one of those films that takes place in Chicago but doesn't like announce that it's doing that. Although you have everything from Cook County Hospital to Memorial Hospital to the St. Patrick Day's Parade, which I don't know if you guys noticed or not. They actually kind of filmed that movie like when the parade was actually happening.
Yeah.
It wasn't pre-planned. So they just kind of filmed it, and you can't guess it because it's so clever how he grabs a little, St. Patrick's Day hat, and Harrison Ford walks out in the crowd with Tommy Lee Jones chasing him down. But yeah, each time I see it, it's like the movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes, but it feels like it's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Because it's so constant with action. And just all the movie stars that pop up. You have Jane Lynch, who plays the doctor. You have Julianne Moore, who was supposed to have a bigger role in the film. But like he was supposed to have like a romance with her at one point. But yeah,
I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm glad they
didn't do that too, because it kind of takes away from he's trying to avenge his wife's death.
Yeah,
moving on so fast.
I'm gonna move on right now.
She's just a rebound. She's just a rebound doctor. That's all she's doing.
Jesus.
Yeah.
No, what they did with that entire arc was short and sweet. He helps the kid into the elevator, figures out what's wrong with him, hands the notes off, and then we get the finale to that little bit when Tommy Lee Jones is talking to Julianne Moore, and she's like, "Well, the kid survived. Well, he saved the kid's life. Yeah. Perfect. That's it. We don't need anything more with that story." What I remember most about this, I mean, the tunnel scene, the tunnel scene at the waterfall at the dam, that became like such a huge cultural thing because that scene's been parodied in like a million things since then, you know. And I think I've seen the parodies of it before I ever saw the movie itself because, like, I was 1993, I would have been 11 or 12, depending on specifically when this movie came out. So yeah, I mean, I probably saw it like maybe in the late 90s, or I didn't go to the movies a lot as a kid, so maybe like late 94, 95, whenever it came out on VHS. So, and even then, as you know, a 14, 15-year-old kid, this movie does grab your attention and you are into it. And it's complex enough to still work as an adult and simple enough that when I was a teenager, I'm like, oh my God, I was into it. I was just all out on it. And actually I bought the first DVD that came out and I just went to put it in today and it's rotted.
Oh,
my DVD had succumbed to disc rot. So
I
was like, well, I was going to upgrade anyway. I guess now I have to.
Sounds like a new horror film, Joe. Disc rot.
Disc rot. There you go.
From the people who brought you VHS comes disc rot.
Yes.
When you thought physical media was safe.
That would be like Black Roses, that if you played the DVD, it'd summon a satanic thing because it was corrupted.
You thought
by
it
rot.
was bad. You thought VHS was bad, but wait till you see CD-ROM as a villain.
What about you? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Basically, I was just gonna say, that's just.
Jeff, what about you?
Well, I was an adult when I saw that, you youngsters. But I really liked it a lot. And I had seen the television show when I was a kid in junior high. And David Jansen was kind of a big TV star then. And, they honored a lot of the feeling of it, though. Honestly, the show was kind of, in essence, he was the overarching theme for the season was he was on the run from Lieutenant Gerard, who I believe was played by Barry Primus. And he was, I think, a detective or a private eye or something after him. And what basically the plot from week to week was Richard Kimball would come into this town and he'd help somebody out. And then Gerard would catch up to him and then he'd have to leave. Kind of the same thing that they did in like Run for Your Life or the Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. Various shows have kind of used that formula. But the movie smartly realized, we had to do it in 2.5 hours and it's got to be done kind of quick. And so we've got to make it sort of this tight story where he's trying to figure out who killed his wife, which was the thing. But that's really the sort of plot, as well as to not be caught while he's trying to do that. The thing that I remember most about the movie is that it had a lot of really good action set pieces, like the one where they're in City Hall and Tommy Lee Jones is running down the staircase the opposite of him, and he's just about to escape, and he gets his leg caught in that, in the glass doors thing, and then Tommy Lee Jones shoots at him, he's like, shh, and he can't get him. And it was kind of like, those are little scenes like that were almost unexpected, but little mini set pieces almost that were very good. But also the thing that I think stood out, and maybe I think why it was such a big hit, is the humor of it. There were really a lot of characters in it. And Tommy Lee Jones won the Best Supporting Actor for that film, which he's kind of the co-lead, really. But he's so funny in it, and he's dropping smart-ass remarks and back and forth with Joe Pantaleone and the rest of his crew, and they're all kind of like old bitchy wives, and like old girlfriends out for a night on the town almost. It's pretty funny, but it makes them human. It makes them real. And it's like, yeah, this is a tough job and it's an important job, but it's also kind of sometimes a funny job, or they're bitching about the donuts or the cold or whatever else. The last thing I'll just say quickly about it, maybe we get into this next, but the thing that also made it, I think, kind of fantastic, and I don't think Harrison Ford gets enough credit for these kinds of things, but his is virtually a silent role. I mean, he doesn't have that many lines in it, and yet he's so grounded, and he gives it such, gravitas and seriousness, and he's very good in it, and you like him so much. He's decent, and, he moves well, but he doesn't move like he's, an action hero. He moves like a regular Joe. And I remember at the time thinking he should have been nominated for Best Actor, but he wasn't, probably because it was too subtle of a performance. But it really is kind of the thing that holds it all together, because I think it gives it that importance that is a good counterweight to the very fun people who are chasing him.
Well, and for Harrison Ford, up until this point, this is actually a different role to see him in.
Yeah, because he's usually the smart aleck.
If you look at it, he's either the smart aleck or he was in dramas or whatnot. But to be in an quote unquote action film, in this chase film, it was a different type of role for him. Where he's actually thinking about, and his character is intelligent too. Being a doctor, he makes. Outside of one decision in this entire movie, he makes very smart decisions overall. I think he takes chances, but he makes smart decisions. But you see him with the ID coming up with the fake ID, so he could sneak into the prosthetic lab, so he could look up information about who had what prosthetic arm. But all of that type stuff is not a role you're used to seeing Harrison Ford in. That type of sneak around type of role. He's usually the front and center character or whatnot, and so I liked that. And his portrayal, you're right, is very subtle. But outside of the scene later on when the one-armed man gets him in the L near the end of the film, and the one-armed man shoots a cop, and he ends up grabbing the gun of the one-armed man. And I'm like, no, leave that gun. What are you doing? Why?
Take the cop's gun.
Leave the cop's gun. And he takes them both and tosses it. I'm like, well, don't do that, because the cops, the cops, it's a trope, and maybe you guys can help me out with this trope, because I've run into it with a couple of films that I've watched recently that are crime films. Are cops just immediately that suspicious of people? Because, like,
I had a lot of cops in my family. Yeah, they are.
Are they really? Because it always.
I don't think they see the citizenry as people that are good most of the time. I think they suspect them. Like, there's probably somebody bad in this group, and I'm looking for them.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear him say it a lot. If he's not guilty of that, he's guilty of something else. I've heard that line used, and I'm like, okay, that's not the way this works. That's really not the way this is supposed to work. Well, he might not be guilty of that, but he's guilty of something else. No, bullshit.
Something, Mike?
I mean, I just think with their line of work, they'd have to be suspicious of people all the time.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
especially these days.
But
so.
But I just found it interesting. You had the one detective, the Chicago detective, like, the system worked. He was convicted. He's a felon. And I'm just like, have you been not paying attention? And that's what I liked about they had that, and I think they had to have the Chicago cops be totally like, Kimball needs to shoot him on sight if you can. We're not gonna look the other way. I mean, you guys live in Chicago, so you might know. But
well, they had to have a third dimension that was kind of a threat to Kimball and to Gerard, because they were infringing on his need to get his man and sort of bring him back alive for whatever reason. That his job wasn't to kill him. His job was to just catch him.
Right.
But the cops are all sensitive and hair trigger, at least in this one, which is a little cliche, but it added an extra element of, now we've raised the stakes. In the second hour, he's got to avoid those cops who are aware of him too and after him for all kinds of reasons.
See, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this is one of the few chase films that really helps keep that Hitchcockian feel, just to throw back to what we were talking about previous, Jeff, before the show went live, of a constant threat. Joe, what do you think? Do you think this film really just does a good job of unlike some other films where you never feel comfortable, and neither does Kimball?
Yeah, and actually, when you just compared it to Hitchcock, I kind of thought of The Wrong Man.
Right.
And
or even North by Northwest, where he's constantly on the run.
Or even North by Northwest, and how you constantly feel uncomfortable with them. The thing that I really, and you guys are right about Harrison Ford's performance being almost silent, because a lot of time he does spend a lot of time alone in this movie looking for things. And I love that this film does perfectly the old adage of show don't tell. He doesn't have to spell everything out to us. We see him following following somebody up to the process. We see him just waiting by the door. We see the janitor comes out and he just slips in. You don't need a lot of noise. And this movie, aside from the scenes where it has to have the noise, it has to be loud and has to have noise, it doesn't.
Well,
and I really appreciate that about it.
Not only that, Kimball, I mean, he immediately knows what he has to do. He's a fugitive. He knows he's got to shave his beard, dye his hair, change his clothes, and you get that wonderful scene where right after he does all that, they send out the APB and the fax. Yes, folks, 93, okay? The fax of his picture where he's got the beard and he's kind of ragged. So he's all clean cut, wearing and walking like a doctor. And you get that wonderful scene where he walks right past a cop who just looked at the fax. And he's like, oh, hey, Doc, your barn door is open, because he forgot to zip up. And you even get that humorous line in there, too.
Right before that, because he's like, have you ever seen the guy who's like 6'1", looks like that? They basically describe it. Every time I look in the mirror, except maybe the beard.
Isn't that funny? It's a great line. It's a great line.
Yeah, everyone's kind of like, there's that one scene where he enters a whole elevator full of cops and like nobody suspects him. He just blends in perfectly. And that's kind of the smart thing with Richard Kimball, is that because this man is a doctor, because he's highly educated, he knows how to get his way around and really manipulate those who are going after him. I mean, and Harrison Ford is kind of a mute performance, but it's a pretty good one. I think it led to other performances where he kind of did the same thing, like in Air Force One or something like that, where someone cut up this video way back where it was just Harrison Ford saying, my wife, my family, in like multiple films.
And you know what his big go-to is? His big go-to as a gesture is?
That
finger. Yeah. You find my wife. I mean, you find that
man did it.
Yeah, you
killed my wife.
Or clear and present danger. You're going down.
He goes all the way back.
Get off my plane.
It goes all the way back to Indiana Jones. Now that I think of it.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, it does.
Man, good old Indy.
But yeah, you're right. Kimball is an interesting character that I think also helps with the audience, because unlike other guys on the run, he doesn't lose his cool when he's standing in an elevator full of cops. He knows as long as he plays it calm, people are going to less notice him than if he's getting all fidgety or twitchy or whatnot. He's just the guy in the elevator. And, this is before cell phones, and this is before internet. So communication isn't exactly, widespread of what he really looks like.
Yeah, somebody would have had to have seen that newspaper that day, seen that fax seen the wanted poster somewhere. So the odds that you're just going to walk by somebody, and unless you're somebody who's very distinct looking,
right?
Which, Harrison Ford, or Dr. Kimball looks like a regular guy. You wouldn't think this is a guy who's, a convicted murderer.
One of the things I liked about the movie too is so oftentimes when you're a detective, or even in the Batman movies, you forget to be the detective. You're kind of the brawler, right? And Tommy Lee Jones is willing to shoot, as we just mentioned a few minutes back, but he's also doing some detective work. Like when Kimball, jumps out of the waterfall, and he looks at the trajectory of the water and says, search down there, because he could be down there. Or like, listen to that, do you hear that? Isn't that the L? So he's near the L somewhere. And it's amazing how many times he kind of gets close to him, but because he's a good detective, he's listening, he's thinking, he's quipping about, can you get me one of those little things that, maybe some coffee? But he's also very smart, and the detective part comes across here. He's a good foil for Kimball, because he's kind of an equal, a very intellectual cop, even though you think he's kind of, casual and maybe a little silly almost sometimes. But when the right moments come, he's actually on the case, thinking about it and deducting plenty.
It's a silliness that comes from the confidence of knowing he's always right, because he usually is in this movie. There's a couple times.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
But
true.
he even says it with the whole scene where they're talking about the L. Because at first he's like, "How do you know it's an L? How do you know it's not a train that's just?" And even when what's his name? Oh God, it's the guy from the Rob Zombie movies.
Joey Pants.
Oh no, the other guy. I can't think of his name right now. He's the guy that he was Grandpa Munster in the Munsters remake. I can't think of his name right now.
I'm trying not to remember the Munster remake. Actually,
I didn't hate talking about.
is that the one that Rob Zombie did?
Yeah, this guy, the
yeah.
other guy, he's in all Rob Zombie's movies. I just cannot think of his name right now.
Actually, I think he played Herman Munster. That big guy.
No,
with
this
the
guy was
mustache?
Grandpa Munster in the new one.
Oh,
I just can't remember his name right now.
Daniel Roebuck, because he was.
That
I'll look it up here for you, friend.
I just.
You're right, Daniel Roebuck. He plays the Count in the Munsters. So you're right.
There we are.
Daniel
I lost everybody for a minute. Now I'm losing everybody again.
Nope,
The
there you
Count
are. We
yeah.
got you now.
Do they
Is it
not call him
streaming or is
Grandpa?
it my
He's the
Wi-Fi?
Count. Actually, Joe, I want to know if you're auditioning for the remake of All the President's Men in the role of Deep Throat.
I kind of.
We never got one good
All
shot
the
of Hal
President's
Holbrook in that
Men
film,
with
and we
Deep
cannot see Joe's handsome face.
I got
Daniel-
to get more lighting in here. The issue here is the building the unit I live in doesn't have lighting fixtures, so I'm basically lit by
interesting.
lamps all the time.
I've been in those types of
That's
apartments
fascinating, Joe.
before. I lived in those types of apartments before.
Yeah.
One of
So
the things
I have floor lights everywhere.
Fascinating.
One of the things I think that makes Samuel Gerard an interesting character, as the opposite of Kimball, as far as the guy in chasing him, is there's so much more behind his "I don't care" when Kimball's in the tunnel and says, "I didn't kill my wife." It sums up his entire character, and it's why I think what you were saying, Jeff, he does detective work, but it's why he starts suspecting something else is going on with Kimball besides him being on the run, because he's impartial. He's just sitting there going, okay, if Kimball's
That's
a
not his
fugitive,
job. It's not his job to care.
and he's just like, okay, if Kimball's a fugitive, he's not doing the fugitive pattern. And the detective part in him is just like, well, why? Well, why'd he do this? What's involved in this? He still wants to catch him. And in fact, with that shooting scene, I was watching it again, and it makes me wonder, because at that point, that's like 2/3 of the way into the film, and he's starting to suspect Kimball may be innocent, and there is something else going on, but his job is still to catch Kimball. I'm wondering if he knew that glass was bulletproof and he shot at him to scare him and not actually kill him, because he knew Kimball wasn't armed. Armed.
I mean, he might have been frustrated too, because
there's that too.
Kimball has gotten away from him a number of times by that point and outsmarted him, and he even outran him in that one where he's got his men there and they still let him slip through the cracks, if you will, literally kind of slip through the cracks.
Oh, with the ambulance in the tunnel.
No, the glass thing closing and he just gets his foot out right at the last minute.
Well, and that's the thing. He could have shot him in the foot, and he doesn't. He shoots at the glass, which made me almost wonder this time around if he just kind of did it, as a warning, knowing that glass was going to stop. Maybe not. It's hard to say, but Gerard is just an interesting character, and you can see why they did the spin-off movie U.S. Marshals after this, because Tommy
Which is
Lee
also
Jones,
good, but not as good as this.
It's not as good as this. And Tommy Lee Jones he is awesome in this. You could see why he got the nomination, because his character is so unique as far as the cop who chases the fugitive in so many ways. I just love his approach to this. Not only his quips and everything, but just his mannerisms, his demeanor, everything about it. Like, he came up, like when they first come up to the train derailment and we first get introduced to him and his crew. I'm watching this and I'm like, you're instantly attached to these guys and you want to see more of these characters. They set up a wonderful crew, not just him, but his whole crew of interesting people. I'm like, I want to see more of these people. I'm glad
Don't you guys love the way that crew and Gerard are so familial and casual and kind of goofy with each other, but then they can also turn on the intrepid, inspector thing. I mean, Joey Pants does a lot of that kind of stuff. He's like, he's kind of, I don't want to do this. These are new shoes. Oh, geez. And then he turns around and says, oh, I got this information for you, boss. Here we go, Sam. It's this. And, everybody else that way too. And I think that's like, what I love is when they introduce Tommy Lee Jones, he's kind of like, oh my God, look at this mess. And he's just kind of pissed off and kind of casual, and he's grumpy, and it's late at night. He's hungry, and he's wanting some hot coffee. And then he turns on and goes, all right, listen up, everybody, with this. And he just suddenly commands that whole place. And it's like, oh, that's why they call him, because he's actually not just kvetching, but when he has to be the guy, he's the guy.
Yeah, he's a natural leader.
Yeah. He comes off as a natural
leader. He's got the charisma
leader.
to pull it off. Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that whole scene too, because you get the one cop who abandoned his partner on the bus, and actually Kimball saves his partner, because part of the jail thing is they tried to do a bus. The two folks with Kimball, or three folks with Kimball, tried to get off the bus, tried to do a jailbreak, basically, or bus break. And that's what kind of started the whole thing. And then one of the cops, who are the guards, got injured. And then his buddy is like, oh no, I'm out of here. And so Kimball's like, well, shit. And he's the one that pushes the other cop out the window. And yet when Gerard walks up to him, he's like, the one sheriff's like, oh yeah, I did the only thing I could. I pushed him out of the way, because what am I going to do? It's his partner. And then when they find his actual partner alive, they just are like, you want to revise your story?
You want to revise your bullshit story? Yeah,
they find the shackles, because he's like, yeah, they're all dead. All the inmates are dead.
All right, look at
I did what I could to get him out of the train, but
I got him out of the tree. Oh yeah, no, he's definitely dead. He's definitely dead, and he pulls up the shackles. He's like,
moments after they're telling Gerard, whatever, man.
There's so many times they told me he's dead, like when he jumps down the water chute, and then they're like, well, he's dead. He's like, good, it'll be easier to find then.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's also interesting
body.
But it's also interesting because in all those points, you see Gerard starting to realize that Kimball is not the bad guy. And it takes a while. Yeah. But it's like, oh, so he's the one who helped the guard. Oh, so he's willing to defy death and jump when all he had to do was give up. He was caught, but he's willing to do that because he wants to find his wife's killer. Maybe this guy is telling
he's actually not the killer. Yeah, because even in the hospital, he's like, so this guy's just on the run from us for a homicide. He's just going back to the hospital, being Mother Teresa, helping everybody out.
Exactly, fixing that kid, helping that kid's get into the ER and stuff. I mean, it's really smart, and I also love that very subtle scene. It's kind of the last sort of. If you will, I guess chips falling or whatever. But when he's thumbing through all that brochure about all that, place where all the money was corruptly done, and he's like, making a lot of money in this stuff, don't they? Like, that's the motive, my friend. It always is.
And actually, about that, I have a little bit of insider knowledge, because apparently, my roommate's godfather. He's the other guy on the dais at the event at the end that stands up.
Oh, funny!
He's supposed to be the president of the corporation, and he was supposed to have. He from what he said, he was told he was going to be the president of what's the corporation called? Something Devlin.
Devlin.
Devlin. Yeah.
Barnes,
Devlin. He was supposed to be the CEO of the company, and there was maybe supposed to be a couple of lines in there that he was supposed to have, and I guess they just realized, holy shit, this movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes already. Maybe we just cut that whole subplot out. Apparently there was supposed to be some intimation that this was going all the way to the top of the corporation, like even beyond the doctor that's helping him.
Interesting.
Yeah. That was the whole pharmaceutical drug they were making, right? And then they switched out the bad samples because they found out they were going to hurt the liver with the good samples. That was the one part where I got a little confused, but then as I, watched the movie, I got it a little more, But how did that lead to? One thing that did get me confused was that led to his wife's death because he was going to say that this drug actually causes liver problems.
He had discovered the connection, and
Yeah,
okay.
they were going there to kill him, and his wife just happened to be the one in the house, not him.
Yeah,
because he got called away. He got called away just as they were going in the house.
Right, and the reason she got killed by the one-armed man is because she saw the one-armed man. He got caught. He is expecting Kimball, and he ends up killing her because she saw him. And then, Kimball actually fought, and then the cops are coming, and so the one-armed man had to bolt, and the 911, which was an interesting statement about perspective or how you take evidence, because she's talking passively in the phone. They take it as actively answering the question, and that's what started, that's what really fired all of this off.
She's calling for her husband for help. She's saying Richard, but they think she's begging Richard not to kill her.
Right.
Yeah, and I just love how it all hinged on just that. And I thought that's a very interesting take on evidence and how relying on just one piece of evidence can really, the script here, it's not as deep, but is almost Grisham-ish.
Yeah.
For a long time, up until I rewatched the movie last year just randomly, because I think it was just like on TV or something as I was flipping through, I'll just finish it out. And for a long time, I thought it was based on a Grisham novel. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. No, even back then they said it was based on a TV series. And I think this also came out at a time where John Grisham novels were getting made into movies. Like every year there was a different one.
And of course, Harrison Ford did Presumed Innocent.
Yeah.
And
Tommy Lee Jones is in a couple of them.
Yeah,
that's right. The Client and
the Client was one.
Yeah, we covered that on the podcast a while ago. But so this definitely has a Grisham-esque feel to it, which is maybe what they were going for, because that was the trend at the time. Up until a point, I will say, before this, where he's looking at the one-armed man and he confronts the one-armed man, you're like, okay, this is a good kind of guy trying to prove his innocence. Then we get into the liver samples and the drug company, and that's where it starts to feel more like Grisham, like it's taken from Grisham.
The conspiracy aspect of
the conspiracy aspect, where it goes up higher and it involves the drug corporation. But I even loved how they handled that, because Kimball ends up going to the conference once he figures out that his buddy is the one who ended up hiring the one-armed man to kill his wife. He just walks into that conference, and I just love how he just walks up to him. He doesn't say really anything much to him. He just stares at him. And then as he starts walking away, he starts yelling it out. And when he bolts, I just love how he just passively looks at the group of, these are all doctors now, which it makes sense why it has shock value, where he just goes, yeah, he falsified the evidence so you could have your drug. And he runs out, and it's just drops this bomb and leaves. And it's like, wow.
That's where he did all the finger pointing too.
Yeah.
Like, that man did it. You remember that.
But the other thing is they don't get bogged down in all the details, because you don't have to. You don't need to get bogged down in the details. And I feel like that's where a lot of movies like dude, you just they were covering up the negative side effects of what the drug was doing to the liver, and he was going to blow the whistle, and they tried to have him killed. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything more than that. Everything else is in the buildup of the movie.
And such a great buildup, and especially after you get the cop killed, suddenly the Chicago PD thinks he's a cop killer, so you add the extra threat element. But by this time, Gerard's kind of started putting things together, and he's like, oh wait, we want to bring this guy in alive because he's not actually guilty. And the cops think he is guilty, and he's just trying to save Kimball, and Kimball actually ends up saving him. Spoiler, folks.
And Mark, if you had lived in Chicago, you would realize that Andy Davis put a lot of amateur people into Pam Zechman, Lester Holt, John Daly. These were actual reporters in Chicago at the time, and they're playing the reporters in it.
Oh,
and a lot of the Chicago cops are veteran Chicago actors, local guys who, gave that authenticity. I suppose you couldn't fake that Chicago accent. That
Oh yeah. Well,
I
Andy
think- I think
Davis
You
is
just
a
need
Ron-
Dennis
wonderful guy.
Farina.
Ron Dean is the one who's always like, he's a cop killer. We got to get the cop killer.
Well, in his previous
He
film,
auditioned anybody for that role.
Yeah, it's just missing Dennis Farina. You would have hit the Chicago trifecta, man.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right.
I was gonna
And
say
Dennis
he's-
France, of course.
Yeah, he's in
Dennis
Stony
France
Island.
too. Yeah.
What's that, Mike?
He's in Stony Island, Dennis France. That's Andy Davis's first picture. So yeah, you
There
get
you go.
Dennis France. That's super Chicago. Although I don't think he's from Chicago, is he?
By the way, the one sort of exotic casting choice here is Jerome Crabbe as Charles Nichols, the bad guy. He replaced Richard Jordan, who came to fame in Captains and Kings on television in the late 70s. But he, I think, developed brain cancer and died shortly thereafter, within a year, I think, and had to be replaced as, I think, late in the shoot. In fact, I think they pushed those scenes back until the end, but Richard Jordan didn't recover. He was sick and had to completely leave. And then they brought in Jerome Crabbe, who had kind of a big career as an actor early in the 90s. He did everything from Crossing Delancey to The Fourth Man and some other kind of action films. And then he became a director. But anyway, that was he's trying very hard to kind of suppress his
thick accent.
Dutch accent.
Yeah.
Not entirely
No,
effective, and it gives
it's
probably a
on
little
enough.
bit
Yeah.
international flavor
But-
to it.
But
he's
what I
very
like is
urbane bad guy.
what I like, though, it's not really like called out or anything that he has an accent or he's from some nation, or you don't have some throw off line. Oh, how do they do these things?
Right,
in your
right.
it just, and that's what I liked about that too. I mean, this film, you're right, Mike. I think you said it is like it's 2 hours and some minutes, and it flows so fast. Things just keep moving with this film. And why I'm surprised is because before this, he was doing Steven Seagal.
But now wait a
projects.
minute. Under Siege is a very well done movie. It's a
Oh,
very
man,
well
Andy
done
Davis
movie.
said Under Siege.
I mean, Steven
Yeah.
Seagal is never going to be even Clint Eastwood, but though that's,
And
I think,
he
who his
did
role model
Above the Law and
Yeah, but
the
Under Siege-
package and then,
and Code of Silence, I think, right?
yeah. Then
with-
after this, he did Steal Big, Steal Little, and Chain Reaction.
oh,
But
yeah, here we go.
but I think Under Siege is underrated.
He
Mark the
directed
movie
Holes.
Marshall. Come on, you can admit that you love B movies. He did a
I
pretty
know.
good B. I think
no,
that
I
was a A-list B movie.
Oh my God, he also did Collateral Damage.
Yes, he did.
Oh my God.
And his
Just
last
so
one
you know.
was The Guardian, which if you've
Yeah.
ever seen the trailer for The Guardian, you don't need to see The Guardian. Because that was one of the first, no, literally, that was one of the first trailers
Where they give the
that
whole movie
when
away?
I watched, where they literally give
my
the whole
God.
movie. They start the
Wow.
trailer, they show the
Ah.
relationship between Kevin Costner's son and the girl, and it's like, oh, then they fight, and you're like, oh, okay. But then they show their wedding, and you're like, oh, okay. And then they show a crash, and then they show a wreck, and one of them is drowning, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, is someone going to drown? And literally the next scene in the trailer is the funeral with the picture of the person who was attempted to drown. You're like, I don't need to see this movie. The Guardian.
I can walk in the last 20
I-
minutes and be just fine.
I just remember the previews to that in the press junket when they came out, and I'm like, this looks like the goofiest movie for survival. It just looked like generic survival. What was that? Remember The Perfect Storm? It felt like a shitty The Perfect Storm when I saw the previews to it.
But what I just find it interesting with Andrew Davis, though, with the other films that he did leading up to this, and even some of afterwards, there is gunplay and such in here, but not nearly as much as like in a Steven Seagal
Yeah.
project. So it's interesting how he handles the action scenes in here, because a lot of the action scenes, the tension is just the chase. You don't,
Mhm.
it's not so much the threat of guns, and killing it. It's more of the chase, and then we get our one-armed man, who we haven't talked about, but we don't really get to see him, Sykes, for most of the film
Mhm.
until
No,
near
not
the
until the
end.
end. Yeah.
which is which is interesting because I think that's kind of a nod to the series, because if I remember correctly, you don't really get to meet or see the one-armed man till like near the last season or something.
Right. That's
yeah.
Right.
So maybe that's kind of that approach. And I liked the one-armed man as well, because he wasn't like a Dick Tracy villain, you know what I mean? I mean, he was coherent. He was just acting like a regular guy. And I liked that he wasn't like some obvious thug either. You could have easily had him be some like obvious thug, but he just seemed to be a guy with an art. He's doing his,
I think he was a perfect cop, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was a cop.
Then he started like a whole security like
Right.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone lives in terrible apartments in this movie. Every
How about
place
the
they
fact
go
that
to is just a shithole.
How about the fact that Richard Kimball was able to get an apartment like that? It's like,
Yeah,
did
just
he have
from
the
his
2 proofs of
buddy.
ID and an old bank statement?
I mean, he got his buddy's money, who he thought was his buddy, but I don't know, like, how much money he gave him for an apartment.
Here's
He gave him,
my
like,
phone
$2,000.
bill. Is that good enough?
Well, apartment in
Actually,
1993.
That is answered, though, kind of, because it's one of the great tension moments in this film, in that Kimball thinks he's caught because he hears the cops, and cops have the battering ram, and they're gonna. And it turns out that because he's on the lam, that he has to get a sketch apartment from sketch people. And go figure, these sketch people are caught and are drug dealers dealing drugs to kids. Which kind of explains why maybe the apartment, the place he got was so cheap and under the table in cash, was because these people, but I loved that bit. I loved what makes that bit even better is Kimball hears the sirens. He starts to think to run, but he waits. He sees the cops with the battering ram. He hears them upstairs, and he still waits to see if anybody's going to try to come in, and no one does. And I think, in other films, the guy would have ran. Kimball would have just bolted out the back door. And then, but here he just kind of stays and waits, and he's like, oh, okay, those guys are drug dealers. Whew, okay, they won't be coming this way. And he goes back to making his fake ID.
And then he covers up the sound of the printing when he's in there with the broom on the blinds. Yeah.
Which, let me tell you, okay, I work in IT. I will say this right now, that he had to be brushing pretty hard to make that dot matrix not sound. Because those things were loud. But I love that too, where he just played the janitor and he walked in, and I think that's where Andrew Davis helps keep that feeling of tension, in that people, like, for a moment look and go, is he? And then they go about their business because they second guess themselves. Yeah. So many of those passerbys or whatnot either aren't really paying attention, or they second guess themselves, which allows Kimball to go about his business. But the fact that you put those beats in there just keeps that atmosphere of danger for your main character, which, in all honesty, I don't think you get as much in these chase films, like especially newer chase films.
True.
I think it's more action, like lots of drone shots, lots of helicopter shots and those types of things. The person being chased does something very uncharacteristic, like they'll hurt someone or beat the crap out of someone just so that they can and not care. And that's the thing, is Kimball seems to care about everyone he comes across.
Yeah, there's that one kid in the hospital, like, who's injured, and he like looks up his record, he assigns him to surgery when he was assigned to go into a different room because he knows what's good for the kid.
Oh, well, that's what's great, is he's standing there by the bed and he's just like, look at the film, look at the film, look at the film. And then one guy misdiagnoses it, and then he's just like, fuck. Okay, fine. And he still got his doctor's signature. And again, we're talking 93. So, as far as anyone sees the scribble, that's a doctor's signature. They've seen it before. Yeah. They may not know it's Kimball, but they know it's a doctor's signature. And they're just like, okay, you know, and he knows enough to give enough information, just saying, well, they told me that this kid had needed this, instead of him saying, hey, they need this, and they're just like, oh, okay, and then like, oh crap. It's like I love that segment with the kid, and yeah, watching it again for the show today made me appreciate this film even more.
Yes.
That even for 93, this film holds quite well. There isn't a whole lot that dates it. It's an interesting film. It's really a tight 2-some hours. I wish modern filmmakers would look at this. Because...
And even the credits are sort of like in there too, because like at the end when they drive away, you still have the image. Because I never stopped watching the credits. You know, either I watch the whole credits or I like to see. I'll leave right when I know it's at the black screen. There's no more scenes left. But yeah, it's almost like a full 210. It does not feel like a 210. It feels more like a 150 or a 140. I make it sound like sports now. Are we turning films into that? Like, this movie is not a 210. Furiosa didn't need to be a 230. It could have been a 2.
I find him say that. I say that a lot about modern movies. It did not. This movie did not need to be that long. Even Furiosa, which I liked, I was like, he's still going to shave about 20 minutes off that.
And yeah, definitely
had a much better movie.
The world building was already built in Fury Road, so they didn't need it.
And whereas with this one, you know, there wasn't a whole lot I could think of to shave. I mean,
there's nothing to cut.
There's nothing really to cut. If you did anything, it might even take away a bit from that constant tension feel. Here, you know, and you see your character go from A to B to C logically. You're not just seeing him, oh, he's in Chicago. Oh, now he's in New York. It's like, never mind how he got there.
You know? Well, I mean, the train hitting the bus happened in Southern Illinois, so it's completely feasible that he's going to be able to get up to Chicago easily. If he would have wound up like, what are the cops when they were like, oh, which cities have elevated trains? Well, New York does, Philadelphia does.
Yeah.
Thankfully, this movie didn't decide to go that route.
Right.
And it was always great when they'd figure out a clue or something, and they're like, well, holy crap, he's 6 blocks away. And they're looking for him, and he's literally just down the road from them.
There.
Yeah, that's when they find out with the train if it's above tracks or under tracks. Which you can kind of tell if you're in Chicago if it's above tracks or under tracks. I used to live right by where the L train was. I hated that sound. It's just torture every day.
Well, you could also, when you live near like a metro station, you could hear the train horn occasionally.
Yeah.
The elevated trains don't use those as much. So if it was on the ground, you'd hear the train hitting the horn more often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and you going back to the bridge scene, at first people might say, well, how do you survive that or whatnot? But they set it up fairly well too. He doesn't fall nearly as far as you think, and he slides. He manages to angle it so he slides down, so he doesn't just smack against the water.
Although that dummy shot looked like he was just tumbling.
Well,
around.
The dummy shot, he's like, ah!
Yeah.
You know, the shitty dummy they threw out should have had his arms at least down a little bit, but no.
Because it was like head first going sideways like this. It was you wouldn't survive that angle.
It's not.
You wonder if they did more takes than that one. Like, that's it. We only had the money for the one
35.
dummy, and
We've got
already trashed.
They only gave us the location for 3 hours, folks. We can only throw the shitty dummy once.
Just going dummy after dummy.
Yeah. One of these will work. One of these will work. Yeah.
We're out of shawl sweaters. Make this one work.
See, and now I want that credit of dummy wrangler. There you go. Still,
I mean, it is unbelievable that Richard Kimball could just he's just casually swimming after diving down that. Because when you jump through that, that's like hitting concrete, basically.
Yeah, from that height.
Water. Yeah.
Well, he didn't hit the water completely. They do, because I was wondering about that. They do because the dam is angled a bit. He does slide down into the water. He doesn't exactly smack right, like do a high dive. He does more get slide and pulled under in that, but it's still, it'd be tough. But you don't mind. You're pulling for Kimball at this point. So
Yeah.
it's like
The thrill is in seeing him slip away each time.
Right.
He gets so close, but then he just gets away. And eventually he's not going to get away, but by then he proves his innocence and all that.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah. And in fact, not only does he not get away, he ends up saving Gerard's life from getting shot by the villain, Yeah. which was also an interesting acknowledgement because, again, few words. We don't get thanks for saving my life or whatnot. Gerard just looks at him and Kimball just looks at him back and puts the gun down. And it's like
by that point, he's got completely figured out you're not the bad guy.
Yeah, he's figured it out, but they don't have to say, no, you're not the bad guy. I'm gonna, it's more understood, and you're right. There's more said without words in this film than what is said with words.
Well, they say film is a visual medium, and often it is. You can still argue that. There's still like mumblecore movies that you could say, well, it's dialogue driven. But,
well, it's the talent, though.
What we see. Yeah.
Let's face it. The talent of this film is really what helps put this over the top and make it better than what it could have been. It's the talent in this film. They packed it with talent. It's impressive they got who they did because they got a couple of big names, but the other names are working names or familiar names. They may not have been huge at the time, but they're familiar enough. I mean, Joe Pantoliano. He was in what was he in? He was in
he's in quite a few movies.
He was in Risky Business before this. He was he was become like really like I guess what make him super famous was probably the Sopranos.
Right.
But he's kind of a known character actor. Like a year or two after this, he's in Bound.
Yeah. You had Celia Ward as Kimball's wife, who these were names. I mean, Julianne Moore, they might not have always been at the top of the marquee, but they were familiar people that they were able to bring together, especially character actors. And I think that's what helped really work, that and the two strong leads. I mean, it's like, you could almost get anyone, I'm sorry, to play the villain in this. But yeah, I mean, we'll go around here. Your final thoughts with Fugitive. Would you recommend it? Jeff, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the better action movies of the 90s because it does spend so much time on the characters and the interplay between them. Yeah.
Joe, what about you, sir?
Definitely will. I was actually going to look up right now what won Best Picture the year this was nominated because
Schindler's List.
Okay. Well, yeah, I wasn't. Okay.
That was Spielberg's. Hey, give me another Oscar.
I mean, that was
actually
incredible.
He had not gotten an Oscar.
That's right.
Yet.
That was the first. Yeah, I was like, give me an Oscar, and then there was Saving Private Ryan. Hey, I want another one.
and then of course Weinstein ended up getting Best Picture for Shakespeare in Love.
Well, that was another year.
That was 98.
I was thinking of Private Ryan when he didn't win.
Oh
yeah. But I mean that's amazing. Spielberg did Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year.
Right.
I don't know what other MVP pulled that shit off, but that was just incredible.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know who Tommy Lee Jones beat? A lot of people consider that the best ever category of supporting actors nominated. He beat Ralph Fiennes for Schindler's List, John Malkovich for In the Line of Fire, Pete Postlethwaite for In the Name of the Father, and Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Oh wow.
Those are some pretty
and What's
incredible
Eating Gilbert
supporting performances.
And What's Eating Gilbert Grape is still one of Leonardo's best performances. I loved that. I loved him in that quite a bit. So yeah, that's an interesting year. Those early 90s were interesting years for cinema. They really were.
It really was. They took a chance on remaking The Fugitive, and it paid off. Box office wise, this movie did well. Critically, it did well, and like you guys are saying, 30 years later, it still holds up.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it appeals to all generations, children.
You can show this. You can
people
show
already in the workforce. It was.
I just wonder how this film would play out if it was with modern day technology, with cell phones and GPSs and locations. like half the film would just be people looking at screens.
Facial recognition. They would find him in
Yeah,
10
they-
minutes.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
much more interesting when people are on like hardline phones
Right.
and they're going through maps trying to find out where the killer is. I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of why Blade Runner 2049 was still like very much analog technology, because
Mhm.
screens just aren't that interesting.
Yeah, and Mike, what's your final thoughts with The Fugitive?
I love it. It's a film that I saw on VHS as a little kid. Then I got to see it on the big screen at Ebertfest. And each time I see it, it's just a fun movie. I mean, murder isn't fun, but running away for me.
Chase movies always are.
Yeah, but chase movies are fun.
Yep.
And I don't think you could get like there's so many memorable scenes and great dialogue and banter between characters where you're focusing on the relationship between the characters more than you are the action. Although there is a lot of action. And I think that's why this movie really works. And it's also a great Chicago film too.
There you go.
And it's a cerebral chase movie, you know.
Yeah.
Cars running down, things exploding. This is two very, very intelligent characters trying to outsmart each other.
Cat and mouse.
It definitely some cat and mouse going on. Yeah, The Fugitive definitely holds up. And having it in 93, like you said, with the technology helps. Makes it a little bit easier to use a number of tools and approaches to keep the tension higher. And it's why today I think you're seeing some of these films set in earlier times, but they're not being promoted specifically as, oh, look at us, we're in the 80s. Most of them aren't. Like, Love Lies Bleeding. I didn't even realize that was a period piece, but it is. And there's a number of other films we've had come out in the last few years that aren't focusing that they're in a period, but they are set in a specific period before the digital age. And I think that helps. I think it helps because it makes it easier for you to write some things in versus the digital age where everybody has so much access to info in that.
Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead and finish.
I was just gonna say, analog phones, like here in The Fugitive, fax machines. The fact that you have to rely on word of mouth about Kimball, and how not everybody's invested in the criminal. You think about today, if they made this today and it got announced on the internet, oh, Kimball's a fugitive, everybody would be involved in this film, commenting and scrolling. We'd have people live streaming and going, oh, I think I found Kimball here. It'd be some fake, and there'd be it'd be massive. And here, what helps The Fugitive is the fact that you don't have all of that information as readily available, so he's able to do more than you would say in the modern age, to where you would have to come up with some weird techno trope that he could. Oh, look, here, he knows a tech buddy who can, make him invisible to security cameras or some shit.
Now we're making him the Invisible Man.
or make him the Invisible Man. So yeah, The Fugitive, folks, highly recommended by everyone involved here. It holds up. It's not dated, really. And it's just a fun film, especially if you love Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford. This is some of their best performances, in all honesty. I really like Tommy Lee Jones in this quite a bit. You can see why he got the acclaim he did. So hope you folks enjoyed this first On the Lam episode. We've got some other great, interesting films coming up this month. But right now, what's going to be more interesting is the License to Shill for my panel, for you to find out where you can find all their lovely work with. So, Mike, why don't we start with you, sir? Go ahead. License to Shill is yours.
All right. So YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. You can find my website there. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on TikTok at YPA Reviews Chicago. So yeah, go check me out. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree, and I have new reviews every week, either written and podcasts.
Awesome. And Mr. Jeffrey York.
My podcast, well, I just guest on them all, so I feel like I can say that I'm a regular on yours and often on Kicking the Seat. But my movie reviews are at theestablishingshot.org. I write twice a month about the industry for Pipeline Artists magazine online, pipelineartists.com. I also have Jeff York Chicago 1 minute movie reviews on TikTok, competing with Mark every week as well as Mike to just see who can tell that quicker in that minute. Yeah, that's part of the Chicago Indie Critics, as is Mike. So anyway,
Cool.
There you go.
Awesome. And Joe, what do you got?
I'm on the Literary License podcast this coming month. We just finished doing all the Amicus anthology movies, and we're going to be moving on to just doing a few more for the rest of the season before we get our new topics for next season. Our next 2 films are going to be The Monster Club with Vincent Price, John Carradine, and Donald Pleasance, a film that I loved growing up, and I can't wait to talk about it. And Company of Wolves will be the second feature. Mark's been on the podcast a couple times. We do Batman the Animated Series on the second week, and we're actually about to finish that up because we're on the last couple months of doing that.
Have you really gone through all 188 episodes?
Almost. We're going to be done, I think, in like September or October.
Nice.
What do you think is the best one?
What's the name of it? It was the one with the ones where all the villains thought that they
almost got him.
Almost
got him.
Yeah, that's the one.
Almost
What
got him.
happened in that episode?
That's the one where they're all sitting in the criminal bar, and you've got all the supervillains, and they're all talking about how they almost got
Batman. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's got that wonderful twist at the end. I love that. Yeah, that was so much fun.
That series was how many seasons? I know it's 188 episodes.
It was
Okay, so
4
I did
seasons.
see the whole thing. Because like the second season is like insane. It's like 80 episodes or 60 or something.
Yeah, but that whole series is still probably my favorite cartoon series.
I would also argue that for true Batman aficionados, it is the definitive version of Batman.
Yeah,
it is
by the entertainment industry. Sorry, Christopher Nolan.
No, it is definitive.
Mr. Tim and Mr. Dinny did it better.
And I think if you ask a lot of Bat fans, not to drag this out too long, but I think if you ask a lot of Bat fans, and we mentioned this before, Mask of the Phantasm is still considered one of the top good actual Batman movies where Batman's Batman in that film.
Yeah. It's a Batman movie about Batman.
It's a solid film. It's one of my all-time favorite Batman films. So there you go, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Please stick with us all month. We've got 3 more On the Lam episodes. Next week will be our next rated PC for Pre-Code, where we're looking at 1931 Safe in Hell.
Whoa!
I bought
already. Movie. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think of that because I really love that movie.
Really? So I've not heard of it, but I just reading the synopsis, it seemed like I think there is actually a trailer they made for it. It looks interesting. I can't wait to watch that one. And then after that one, we're going to look at a film from the 50s called Nightfall, which I hadn't really heard of, but it's also about an artist who's on the lam. And then we're going to end with a weird, but it still falls in the On the Lam category with Dark City. So we got a very interesting lineup here on the Spoiler Room. Please, if you haven't, subscribe here and check out the links to all these wonderful folks. And then when you're bored there, you can go to specialmarkproductions.com, where we've got links to everything, including old podcasts and such. So I've got a couple of interviews I'm working on lining up again. It's been a little quiet in the interview realm, but I've got a few coming up. So look for that as well. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our live viewers tonight. And until next time, we'll just say a good night, everyone.
I did not kill my